Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to SPERDVAC, Stu Shostak.
Has anybody here ever heard of Stu Show? Anybody? Okay, that's why I went through the audience and handed out flyers, because now you all know, okay? No excuse, okay? So what we're going to do is show you a little bit of clips from each of our participants first. We'll run a little clip, but before that, we have to make this official. This is how my show opens when you watch it every other Wednesday at 4 o'clock at StuShow.com or on the Stu Show Roku channel. GP, hit it. Show them the opening.
Simulcast live from Chatsworth, California, it's Stu's Show. Unrehearsed, uncensored, up-close and personal conversations with top celebrities from the world of television, both in front of and behind the cameras. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's your host, Stu Shostak.
Applause, 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 applause. See, I don't get that in my office because we don't have a live audience. Okay. So, I should have had the announcer make that say Costa Mesa. Now I'm going to bring up the people that you came here to see, because you didn't come up here to see me. So, we are going to start off with a lady whose dad had one of the most famous voices in all of radio and television. She herself is one of the top casting directors in Hollywood. We're going to just show you a couple of minutes of both of their work. You're going to know who this man is immediately. Roll clip 1, please, GP. Applause, 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 applause.
The Lone Ranger. Are you Silver? A fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty Hi-Yo Silver. The Lone Ranger. Hi-Yo Silver! Away!
With his faithful Indian companion Tonto, the daring and resourceful masked rider of the plains led the fight for law and order in the early western United States. Nowhere in the pages of history can one find a greater champion of justice. The Lone Ranger rides again.
Nancy Foy! Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, keep it. Please welcome Nancy Foy! That's a longer walk than I thought it was. Now, let me make sure your mic works. Say hello to the jolly folk.
Hello, jolly folk.
Can you hear her okay? Yes. All right, okay. Now, someone who I absolutely adore came in from Vegas just to be here. She has worked so much as a child and an adult in both radio and television that to list all of her credits would take the whole length of this event. Here are some, and I've got to read them because there's so many. Leave It to Beaver, Wagon Train, Gidget, Star Trek, The Patty Duke Show, Father Knows Best, and Old Yeller. Remember the Disney film Old Yeller? Okay, one of her favorite people in her whole life, someone who treated her just like she was his own daughter, is this gentleman. Hit it, GP.
Mommy, look, it's Jack Benny.
Why, so it is.
Is that the Jack Benny we watch on television all the time?
That's right.
Why does Daddy always get so mad when he says he's 39?
Because your daddy is 39. That's the reason.
Mommy, can I go over and get his autograph? Me too.
Yes, go ahead. I'll wait for you.
Mr. Benny? Mr. Benny, can we have your autograph?
Oh, yes, of course.
You can write it on our comic books.
Oh, certainly, I'll be glad to.
Mr. Benny, you're our favorite comedian.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
We think you're funnier than anybody.
Oh.
We even like you better than Captain Jet.
Captain Jet?
Zoom!
You know, Mr. Benny, you're so wonderful on radio and television. Why don't you ever make any movies?
Yeah. How come you never did make any pictures?
How come I never made any movies? Why, kids, I made... Well, never mind.
I knew you'd get it.
Isn't it wonderful, Mr. Benny? A whole new generation coming up that'll never know.
Please welcome Miss Beverly Washburn, ladies and gentlemen. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. The worst thing for an actor is to have the applause die down before they... Beverly Washburn! Right next to Nancy. And another wonderful person that I've had the pleasure of knowing for 25 years. She was part of the iconic Dennis the Menace television series. She played Dennis's nemesis. I've been practicing that. Try saying that 3 times real fast. Dennis's nemesis. Take a look at this clip from 1959. Roll it, GP.
Hello, Dennis. Do you want to play house with me and the children? Don't bother me while I'm at the office, Margaret. You got any money in that purse? Sure, you want it? No, I'd just like to sell you some root beer. How much is it? A penny for all you can drink. Okay. What? More. That's all you can drink for a penny. Who said so? I said so, that's who. I don't know if you'll get married or not, Dennis Mitchell. You'll make a terrible father. You'll be a pretty crummy mother if you're going around hitting people over the head with your children. You want to buy some more root beer? Now. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dumbo Margaret, Jeannie Russell. Jeannie Russell, Jeannie Russell, Jeannie Russell. I'm trying to keep them applauding. Jeannie Russell, Jeannie Russell, Jeannie Russell. What was that look for? She just gave me a dumb old Margaret look. What was that for? We'll move along. Okay. Now, this is the first time I've met this lady, and I couldn't be more thrilled. She's was not only a gifted young actress in movies and TV during the 50s and early 60s. I hate to say it because it's so long ago, but I was alive then too. You're okay with that? Okay, good. But she went on to become a teacher, a playwright, a songwriter, and has been the artistic co-director. I keep getting those artistic co-director of the Santa Monica Playhouse since 1973. I could have picked any number of clips to show you this lady in action, but I chose this one. Hit it, GP.
Oh, Evelyn, I'm glad to see you.
I'm glad to see you, too.
I'm glad to see you. It isn't every day we have a big star up there. You must be the smallest big star in town, huh? How old are you, about 43?
No, I'm 9.
9?
Yes.
Are you married?
No.
You're not married. And what are some of the big TV shows that you've appeared on, Evelyn?
Well, the first real big one was Playhouse 90 when I did Eloise. Then I was on the Dinah Shore Show, the George Gobel Show, Omnibus, the Red Skelton Show, the Patrice Mansell Show, Wagon Train, G Theater, Lux Playhouse, and many more.
You've been on television much more than I have. Do you want to go on being a TV actress when you grow up?
Yes, I do.
What about the theater? Have you no interest in going on Broadway?
Yes, I might like it.
You might like it, yes.
Yes, you know, the only real thing I did on stage was when I was in Macbeth.
Yes.
And I was killed. And, you know, every night I got the giggles just as I was about to be killed, and I died laughing. You know? The producer and the director just died.
Do you have any other ambitions other than the theater?
Yes, I would like to be the President of the United States.
You want to be president? That's a noble ambition, you know. We've never had a woman president.
Well...
What makes you think there ought to be a woman president?
Well, I think a woman has just as much right to be president as a man does.
I think so, too.
All right, ladies, settle down.
Why do you want to be president when there are so many more lucrative jobs open for a young star?
Well, first of all, I might have some ideas by then about what to do with America. And second of all, I made a little bet with my girlfriend of $2,000 that I would be.
You bet $2,000? Were you in the South then? Was this Confederate money?
No.
Well, where did you get the $2 grand?
I don't have it yet.
Oh. Well, suppose you lose.
Well, she doesn't have it either, so...
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Evelyn Rudie! Oh, look at that! The gymnast, just boop, right up there. That's the way to do it. You still want to be president? No. You were way ahead of your time, way ahead of your time. Okay, last but certainly not least, my buddy, my pal, one of the greatest game show hosts this business has ever had, one of the greatest voices. Oh, I'm so jealous because I sound like Mickey Mouse. He's got the greatest voice in the world, a fantastic, somebody agreed with me, radio disc jockey, game show host, but I found a clip of him that I didn't know he excelled in. Take a look.
She upset my nerves. My eyes started doing little hips and nerves. All love broke loose. All love broke loose. Oh, my heart and soul went completely out of control. Well, when I kissed my baby, and when she squeezed me tight, my heart exploded like dynamite. All love broke loose. All love broke loose. My heart and soul went completely out of control. Oh, my baby satisfies me. She puts my mind at ease. When she tells me that I'm so easy to please. So when she said, I love you, with all the sweetest words, and I felt like a fly and there was no bird. All love broke loose. All love broke loose. My heart and soul went completely out of control.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis II, Mr. Wink Martindale.
Thank you.
Make sure his mic is on. Give him a test.
Hello, hello, hello.
I've known you, what, 20 years? I didn't know that existed. What is that from?
That's in 1958. I got a call from New York when I was still a DJ in Memphis, and they were doing one of those early B rock and roll movies in the Bronx, and asked me if I'd like to be in a movie. Of course, as a kid in Memphis, being in the movies, are you kidding? Now I see this and I wonder why I did it.
It's great. Now everybody knows Deck of Cards was a big hit for you.
Yeah.
You basically, see, they know, you can applaud Deck of Cards. That was a big hit for Wink. But you kind of talked your way through that. That wasn't singing, as I recall, right?
What, Deck of Cards was a narrative, right?
Narrative, yeah.
Yeah.
I found this and I went, whoa. But it was great. I mean, Evelyn was getting in. I was watching her. She was, you know.
Thank you.
You got a new fan here, I guess.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
We'll talk more about that in a second. I want to start with Nancy, though, and let's talk a little bit about your dad's career. And as a child, did you ever go and watch your dad work anywhere? Let's talk about that first.
I did. I was never present at any of the Lone Ranger recordings.
Too young for that.
I was too little, but I do remember being in my grandmother's kitchen in Detroit and listening. I have a recollection of that. But I did go with him. In fact, when I was probably, I'm going to say maybe 8 or 9 years old, he was doing a show, a weekend show in Windsor, Canada. He did the announcing for science fiction theater, right?
Yeah.
So we would go on Sunday. He had these cue cards that he had made. I'm not sure who printed these, but these cue cards. And he would print his dialogue on the cue cards and take me with him from Detroit over, under the thing to Windsor. And then I would hold the cue cards up for him in front of the camera while he did the live announce during the breaks on the show.
So he put you to work.
He did. So, all three of us spent a lot of time visiting our dad at ABC, in the announcing booth. It was just part of what our dad did, and we would sometimes go to work with him.
He was the announcer on the Dick Cavett show, right?
Yes, he was for many years. Oh, yes. We spent a lot of happy evenings in the audience at the
because Dick Cavett's
show.
one of my idols.
Yeah.
You know, he's one of my favorite talk show hosts, and the
Yes.
lineup. I mean, he had Betty Davis and all these big stars.
Absolutely.
You know, Bob Hope was on there a lot. Lucille Ball.
Yeah.
Did you get to meet anybody during that?
You know, not that I recall. Not that I recall, but I did see a lot of the shows, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's just give everybody a little bit of background on your dad in case they're not familiar with his. Well, this is a time radio. They're all familiar with it, but this will be a rerun for a lot of you. Shortly after high school is when he started announcing professionally, right? In the late 30s?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Don't tell me that I know more than you, Nancy. Please don't do that to me. So he was drafted into World
He
War
was
II.
drafted, he served in Cairo, Egypt.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring that up because he did a lot of announcing for the armed forces.
Yes, and he
produced
wrote his own
shows.
material.
Yes.
He wrote most of his own material, yeah.
All right, and then when he, after the war, he went back to Detroit, and in 1948 is when they hired him to do the Lone Ranger announcing.
That's right.
And he did not do that on television, by the way.
No.
When the show went to television, Gerald Moore, another actor for General Mills, he was the spokesperson
But
for
Dad
General
he did the opening, the beginning portion. That's my father's voice on the television show.
Is it?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
what I heard was, because I've got original broadcasts.
Oh, no, that's Dad.
I've got original broadcasts, and it doesn't sound like him. I know that when the show entered syndication after the network run,
that
they
may
had
be
your
it.
dad come in and redo
Okay.
it. And that's the one that I showed here. That's the one
Yes.
that everybody is familiar with. He loved to take part in these old-time radio
Yes, he
conventions,
did.
didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and did Larry, John, did you guys ever have him here? Four
Yeah.
times. Did you ever give him an award because he deserved? Okay.
Yes, they did.
All right. I'm also making sure they didn't fall asleep back there. Okay. Yeah. Now we need to talk about your career. Now, I looked on IMDb. You had a couple of minor acting roles here and there, but your specialty is casting. And I
Yes.
have never, I've been on the air 13 years with my own show, and I've never had a casting. Wait a minute, I take that back. Didn't Marvin Page do the show? I had Marvin Page.
Sure.
Okay, but he did mostly movies, some television. He did General Hospital.
Yes.
But I'd really, first of all, like to know how you got into casting. I assume you weren't just hired to be a director, you worked your way up.
I worked my way up. I had been pursuing an acting career in New York. I went to Carnegie Mellon University, and I have a degree in acting. I graduated in '72, went back to New York, did, off-Broadway, off-Broadway, a little bit of regional theater, the things that you do. And I moved out here in '79, intending to continue to pursue an acting career. But I was 29 years old, and I was not where I wanted to be. And I really wanted to go to work regularly. And I wanted to have a real job, and casting was the door that opened first. And I started as an assistant. I was a receptionist, actually, answering telephones in the casting office.
Where?
Zoetrope Studios in Hollywood.
Oh.
Coppola's little studio there.
Yeah.
Las Palmas and Santa Monica Boulevard. And I very quickly, that was in 1980, I very quickly worked my way up into the casting office there and was assisting on projects like The Outsiders, Rumblefish, and then one thing led to another, and it's been a terrific career.
So when producers ask you to cast, I'm assuming in the movie business they have the leads pretty well cast because that's what sells.
No, not necessarily.
Really,
It all
really, and
depends.
Evelyn is shaking her head too.
Yeah.
Remember, I'm a TV guy, not a movie guy. So let's hear this.
It all depends, and I've worked at studios, and I've worked as an independent casting director. And yes, sometimes you will come into a situation where the lead is already in place. Sometimes they rely on the casting director or the casting executives at a studio to go through the lists of actors who would be appropriate, actresses who are appropriate, check their availabilities, make the offers, and then once a picture is set up, let's say, with a lead or two leads, then the casting person can go ahead and cast the rest of the movie. So it really depends.
Okay, now
It really depends.
I got to ask you this: producers and actors all have friends. Hey, can you give my friend Freddie a part in a film? When that comes to you, it lands on your desk.
Yes.
Charlton Heston wants his pool boy to have a role in the film. How do you go about satisfying that desire, Nancy?
What I can do is have an actor or actress come into my office. I can have a meeting with them. I might even be able to have them come back and read for a small part in something I'm casting. And if they're right for it, then I might bring them forward to the director. And if the director chooses that actor, then that actor goes through the process of being vetted and approved by the studio or the television network. So there are a lot of steps. So I can't actually give a person a part, but I could certainly I could encourage and I could campaign on behalf of an actor's getting the part if he or she is right for it.
Okay, so you don't have to take suggestions from the producers then? If they say, we've already got this part covered, you're out of it at that
Well,
point?
if it's cast, if a deal is made, then that's done.
Yeah, because what I was going to ask you is if you ever did a favor for somebody and based on them saying, hire this person, the person didn't work out, and you had to recast, but the person who asked you to do this, follow me, it doesn't apologize for asking you to hire him in the first place.
That's where I can't go into that. I don't even know.
Oh,
how to
darn,
answer
there's
that,
only like
but that's
50
a
people
question.
here. I mean,
But
I'll have them sign NDAs. It's okay.
There are many ways that people get cast.
Okay. I mentioned to you before we started today that one of my favorite films was a cable film on HBO about 25 years ago, The Late Shift.
That's right.
Which was the story of Jay Leno and David Letterman both vying for the Tonight Show.
Yes.
And the casting was, that's if this lady hasn't convinced you yet that she's the greatest casting agent, you got to see that film. No, because you hired people that not only looked and sounded like the parts, but actually, I forgot I was actually watching actors.
Yeah.
And that must have been really difficult for you to do because that had to be so precise because the public knew Jay Leno and David Letterman so much.
That's right.
How much, was that all you? Did you cast the whole thing?
I cast it along with a casting director in New York. Phyllis Huffman and I cast it together, and we share credit on it together. And Betty Thomas, of course, directed the picture. But yeah, it was a real challenge. So you have to go through a lot of actors, of auditions, of tapes, trying to find the people who not only might resemble the real people, but actors who can capture the quality, the tone, whatever it is about that performer that makes them unique.
Gotcha.
Not easy.
Any comments about working with Robin Williams on Disney's Flubber, the remake?
I wasn't that close to him. Do you know? He was also in Jumanji, which I cast, the original Jumanji. So I've sat with him at table readings when we would have the table read before production, and he was wonderful and funny at the table.
I was going to ask, was he crazy and nuts?
He was inventive and clever and unpredictable. You never knew what was going to happen at the table, but there was I wouldn't say crazy. He was a unique and very special individual, gifted.
And left us far too young. Who knew about those demons, you know? Really, really tough. I want to thank you again. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Again, that's 1,000th of the work that this lady has done in the television and movie industry. Hello, Miss Washburn, or should I say Miss Archer? No one's going to get that except you, me, and Janine.
We have a little inside joke.
She said to me, she came in, she gave me a big kiss. She goes, "I'm old news." No, you're not. Because here's one thing she's been on my show 3-4 times, once on the television show, 3 times on the audio show. I never asked you the difference. Beverly's one of the few people who worked on Jack Benny's television show and his radio show at the same time. I never asked you what the difference, if there isn't even a difference between working for Jack Benny on radio as opposed to television. Is there less pressure, more pressure? You have the script in front of you. Tell us a little bit about the difference working for Benny, radio versus television.
Okay, well, first I just have to say thank you for having me here, because when Walden said, Stu wants you on his panel, and I went, but I'm old news. You know, like I've told my story so many times.
No.
So thank you for having me here.
Thank them. They love you. Right?
Well, it's so nice to see so many of you that I recognize. So, you know, you've probably already heard most of my stories, but I have to say, you are so amazing, Stu. That clip that you showed,
I surprised you, didn't I?
I have never seen that in my life.
That's one of the live shows out of Television City.
Yeah.
I just got that, and first of all, I didn't realize that was you because you're on profile for a lot of it. And I was gonna, I didn't want to bring in the Roosevelt thing. Everybody has seen that, and they've seen
the Margaret Truman.
Margaret Truman. Yeah, I get my presidents mixed up, especially these days. But in any case, I thought this would be great to surprise you with this.
That was a surprise, because back then it was in the days of live TV. So now, everything you can find on YouTube, and, everybody records everything, and everything's on DVD. I have never seen that in my life.
I was watching you watch it, and
I was like, I vaguely even remember doing, what was that from?
1954, Christmas.
Christmas,
Yeah.
okay.
Beverly, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you did a lot of stuff back then.
Thank you. I was very blessed. I have a lot of wonderful memories, and working with Jack Benny, of course, was one of my fondest memories. He was probably one of my favorite people in the whole world, and the most generous person in the world, which was always so funny that he played the stingy tightwad because he was, anything
Totally
but.
the opposite. But was there a difference between the radio shows and the television?
Well, back then I was so young when I did all that. I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't realize that I worked with Jack Benny. To me, I didn't know who he was. And it was like when I did the Greatest Show on Earth, I had no idea that I was being directed by Cecil B. DeMille, because to me, he was just a nice man who was telling me, what to do. And Jimmy Stewart was the clown. It was in the little scene in the circus. And I didn't know who Jimmy Stewart was, And so for me, it wasn't until I became an adult that I look back on my career and I realized how blessed I was, really, to have worked with so many wonderful people. So it was just a job.
Just a job, but there was no difference in Benny's, I don't want to say stress level. There was never any tension doing the Jack Benny program.
No, he was just the nicest, warmest person that I ever met. And the first time I worked with him was on the little skit that is now on YouTube, where I come up out of the audience, and my name happens to be Margaret Truman, and there's a whole... Yeah. Well, it was back in the days of live TV where you don't get a second chance. Now they have live TV, but they have the capability if somebody, they don't like to go back and redo it, but they can.
They do, believe me.
And back then it went on the air. And so he told me later that he was a little bit nervous because I was 8 years old and I had a lot of dialogue. And he said we didn't rehearse in front of an audience. But when the show went on, there was an audience. And he said he didn't know if I would suddenly get stage fright, or I'd forget my lines, or I'd run off, or I'd start crying. He didn't know what to expect. And so fortunately, everything went well. And then he was so kind to me. He kind of took me under his wing, and I did several shows with him, his radio show, a couple of TV shows, and then we toured all over the East Coast in 1970 or 71. We played Vegas at the Sahara.
Remember, I saw you at Tahoe back in those
Yeah,
days.
I know. Yeah. It was so good to do your show. He is so amazing. He comes up with stuff. It's like, where did you find that? Like that one. That is just amazing to me.
I have an incredible bag of tricks, ladies and gentlemen.
You do. You really do.
Let's talk about Lou Costello. I'm picking the biggies here for the audience here. How many of you knew she did an episode of Wagon Train with Lou Costello? Anybody? Okay, a few people. This is good. Then this will be new to them. See, I'm taking care of you.
Thank you.
Lou and Bud Abbott had recently split, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I seldom am, but this was Lou Costello's first dramatic role on Wagon Train.
And he was wonderful.
Now, you got to tell him about how he relieved the tension on the set and talk about Ward Bond a little bit, all right? Because we didn't talk about this the last time you were on my show, and I regret it, so we'll get it on the record here.
Okay, and I'll try to make this quick because you have a lot of wonderful people to talk to.
I know, it's 1:35, I just looked, we're fine.
Well, when I was cast in Wagon Train and found out that I was going to be working with Lou Costello, it was a huge thrill for me because, of course, I was a big fan of Abbott and Costello. And in the episode, some of you have seen it, I saw by your hands, we played stowaways, and I was an orphan, and we traveled together, and then there's a murder, and they think that he did it because he drinks. And it turns out it wasn't him, of course. And it was written by Harry Von Zell, who you'll remember as the announcer from Burns and Allen.
Wow.
Yeah, he wrote the episode, and spoiler alert, he's the murderer.
Well, of course, if he's writing a script for himself, what do you think?
Right.
Luckily, he didn't do a Perry Mason, or we would have had another hour of him.
Anyway, Lou Costello was so kind to me, and it was such a thrill to work with him. And because, he had done Abbott and Costello, and he had free reign, he could pretty much ad-lib everything. And on this, he had to stick right to the script, which was difficult for him. And so every time we'd be doing a scene, and he would stop, and instead of just going, oh, I forgot, or whatever, every single time, for some reason, he would look straight into the camera, and he'd go, so how are ya? And he would do that every time. I don't know. And I would get the giggles, of course. And then I think he kind of did it almost intentionally to make me laugh because he was adorable. I loved working with him.
Tell them about Ward Bond and your social worker on the set.
Oh, well, when you're a child, as you No. You have to have what's called a welfare worker on the set with you. And they call them welfare workers because they're actually there to look out for the child's welfare. You have to have 3 hours of schooling. You can only have, you have to have increments of 20 minutes at a time of schoolwork. You have to have your breaks. You can't work overtime. You have to have an hour for lunch, and on and on. So anyway, when we were doing, I did 3 episodes of Wagon Train. The first one was with Ernest Borgnine, another wonderful, kind human being, and that was the pilot. Anyway, Ward Bond, who was a terrific man, but he was used to working with a lot of men, so he had kind of a foul mouth, and so he would swear all the time. Well, I was young, and I didn't even know what the word meant, so it didn't really bother me. But the welfare worker went up to the director.
Let me explain those words to you.
I've never heard Wink Martindale curse, because you've been on the air for years.
Oh, shit.
Would you like to hear Wink swear?
I just did. I missed it.
I missed it because once again I interrupted him. All right. Go ahead, Beverly. Sorry.
Anyway, so hi, Sandy. The welfare worker went up to the director and said, if he swears one more time in front of her, I'm pulling her from the set. And she had that much clout. I mean, she could do that. So, of course, they had to go talk to Ward Bond and, ask him not to swear anymore. And he wasn't even aware that he was doing it. He was just used to being with a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
And it would just kind of roll out of his mouth. So, of course, he apologized profusely, and he never even said darn after that. So.
He's probably scared they're going to lose their star child actress. So much more. Let's plug your book real quick. Real Tears. REEL Tears.
Thank you.
Second edition on Amazon. Great book. And we don't have time, but her scrapbook. Millions of pictures from the scrapbook, call sheets, and behind-the-scenes photos of her with Jack Benny and everything. If you don't have the book, you should have brought some down here. Did you bring any?
No, I didn't.
You're not mercenary enough. Anyway, Amazon.com, Real Tears. Hello, Jeannie Russell.
Hi, Stuart.
That's for Beverly and for Jeannie. Okay, we'll kick it into high gear a little bit here because I want to ask you about the birds, but first we got to talk about Dennis the Menace. First we got to talk about you getting into the business. Remind me, was this the Lassie story when you guys lived near where they were filming Lassie? That's how they discovered Jeannie Russell?
We lived on Fernwood. My father was a singer, and you may remember Sheb Woolley, Purple People later. One of my dad's
never heard
buddies.
Of him.
My mother was a pianist, concert pianist and accompanist, so she was always working singers out. And my little brother and I were taught vaudeville-type acts, before we even started kindergarten, okay? So this was my childhood. It was like Gypsy, okay?
Well, your father?
No, he was a friend of my father's, okay? Sorry. Anyway, so we lived on Fernwood at Van Ness, and they later went on, Norman Lear used the name of that street, Fernwood, USA, in Mary Hartman.
Yeah, he immortalized Fernwood Avenue.
Yeah, and one day there was a knock on the door, and it was a PA from the Lassie set, and they'd spotted my adorable little brother on the street, and they said, we don't want to pull John out of school, the 20-minute rule, and we need a small hand to hold up a can of Campbell's, and would you be interested in having your son do it? Well, they knocked on the right door, okay? So we got in on the Lassie set, and John's mom hit it off with my grandmother, and they'd come over for lunch, and sometimes they'd spend the night because their family home was in Pomona. And then we started doing extra work. And my dad was singing with a woman named Althea Shaw, who was married to Glenn Shaw. And he had, he was our agent. And Jerry Mather's agent, Ryan O'Neill's agent. He got Sue Lyon, Lolita. And so they started sending us out. And I'd go on interview after interview and come home so sad because all these beautiful little blondes were getting the job, And they finally had a role for a redhead. And at the audition process, I'd see all these little blondes with red hair. And one kid had gloves on because they'd gotten dye on her hair. Anyway, they went to New York, and then they came back here, and I wound up with the role. It was just meant to be, I guess, so.
Tell them how long it took to get into your Margaret. What are you?
My Margaret drag.
Your Margaret drag.
Yeah. I'd have to go in the night before. They'd wash my hair and put hair glue in it and roll up individual pin curls. I must have had 100 of those on my head. And then I'd sit under the hairdryer while these things heated up, okay? And then I'd have to sleep like that. And then I'd get to work the next morning, they'd take all the pin curls out, and then she'd get a stick, and she'd roll about, 4 or 5 of these pin curls together, spray it, I mean, the shenanigans took an hour. They should have just bought me a wig, but I didn't think they thought that the show would go on that long. And this was the day of big hairdressing departments and makeup departments. I was in there once getting done. Jay North was having his hair bleached and his cowlick made, and he was under a dryer on a booster seat, and Jane Fonda was getting made up for the awards, so it was just kind of fun. But
Wow.
And when I met Allison Arngrim from Little House, we were laughing about the hairdo, and then when I found out they got her a wig, I said,
Yeah.
"You wuss!
Yeah.
You wuss! You just got to pop a wig on your head? My God!" And so the first thing I'd do when I'd get off work is stick my head under a faucet and get rid of
there were
those
some
curls.
times, though, as I recall, where you just went home and wanted to play with your friends and you stayed in the Margaret drag.
Yeah.
That was weird.
And this was near LeConte Junior High, okay?
Yeah.
And one day, I was out there, and I still had some makeup on, and my curls were in, and a couple of teenage boys drove by in a car and said, "Hey, there's that monkey from Dennis the Menace." Well, that's all I needed to hear, so it was head under the faucet
the drag
after
queen
that.
was over, and back to being Jeannie
right.
Russell again.
And then subsequently, whenever they'd send us out on personal appearances, Pacific Ocean Park, Girl Scout cookie rallies.
Pacific Ocean Park, ever heard of that, Wink? Yeah. Okay.
They'd have to make me up. I'd have to go in and get my hair done, and put glasses on my face. And it was years and years and years and years and years before I could stand to wear glasses, because every time I always responded to costuming for character.
And now we have to, right?
Yeah.
Your glasses on Dennis the Menace had no lenses in
No
them.
lenses at all.
Because not only would they reflect, but she didn't need to wear them.
And they were very, very lightweight, and they used to tickle, into the day and drove me crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about the birds, because a lot of people
This is
don't know you're in the movie.
This is something that I have never talked about, and I got really brave this year because Jay and I have pretty much exhausted the nostalgia circuit on Dennis the Menace. So I thought, I want to get out there. So I contacted Bodega Bay, and I said, this is who I am, sent them my pictures, and I said, not many people know I was in the birds, too. And they contacted their historian, and he said, "Oh, God, we got to get her up there." So I thought, what am I going to say? Because if you blink in the film, you'll miss me. And what happened was, because I was a co-star on a network series, I had a one-on-one interview with Alfred Hitchcock. Okay, so I walked in his office, and there he is sitting behind a big desk. And he's got storyboard all over the walls of kids with their eyes gouged out and running. And now when a child actress goes into an interview, they go in to sell themselves. Had my picture book, I put it on his desk, and he doesn't say anything to me. And I said, "Oh, I love horror. I'm in a comedy series, and oh man, I love horror." And he goes, and I said, and I go on babbling and babbling and babbling. I have no idea what was going on in his head. I'm selling the heck out of myself. He was probably thinking, I can hardly wait to get this fat kid on a hill and chase her with a bird and a camera truck. Anyway, so I get home, and the agent goes, "You got the job, you get a script when you get to Bodega Bay." Well, get up to Bodega Bay, and the script was page after page of that silly limerick the children sang in the schoolhouse. Okay, and with meticulous camera angles, and now she drags on a cigarette, now she turns this way. This went on for pages, and the production note was I was in group 1, girl 5. Well, of course, the agents were called. They had about 5 of us from Hollywood to flesh out, that running scene. So started down that hill, and first time down the hill, they had a bird strapped on my back, and it actually drew blood on my head. And they had to re-rig it. And talk about welfare workers. She stopped Hitchcock, okay? She said, this camera truck is following these kids too closely. Because kids were falling and snowballing. So taking out other kids. And she said, there's no way this truck's going to stop in time. So she made him back the camera truck up, and then she made a PA go into town and get pink-colored tights for the girls.
Stay where you are right there. Was Hitchcock directing this, or was the second assistant?
He was there.
So he must not have enjoyed hearing the welfare worker.
He did not, as with my interview, he did not change the expression on his face. He would ride the truck, as directors did in those days. There was no such thing as Video Village. And the AD was on the megaphone, calling things out. He just looked straight ahead. Didn't change the expression. In fact, I was used to working with directors, and I wasn't intimidated by Alfred Hitchcock. My brother had already done one of his Alfred Hitchcock Presents. So you get on set and you go, "Good morning, Mr. Hitchcock." Just look straight ahead. And his chauffeur or his AD would eventually go. And one of the kids from Hollywood said, "How do you like my British accent, Mr. Hitchcock?" And he said, "If that's what you mean, it's horrible." And those are the only words I ever heard him say. Okay, so here's what happened. It's right in the script that then they go back to I guess it was still review at that time, and do treadmill work so they can get the camera in closer. Well, wouldn't you know it, Dennis the Menace wanted me that week. So I was in the big master shots in Bodega Bay, but couldn't go back for treadmill. So they slapped another kid, never met her, never saw her before or since, in my
Evelyn
wardrobe.
Rudie, ladies. No, I'm kidding.
No, but it's funny because Shari Lee Burneth was in that as well. And another role I lost because of that was a Mr. Ed. I wanted to ride Mr. Ed so bad, and I got the job, but Dennis the Menace wanted me, so Shari Lee got to do it. But if you look at that, if you slow that down, you go, "Oh, there I am. Who's that kid in my sweater?" And so she got in the closer frames.
Oh, Jeannie.
But that was it, and it was just, I wouldn't have traded it. I had a total blast, but it was a great experience.
With the technology.
I still get residuals.
The technology we have today, you can come over and we can shoot that, and I'll send it over to Universal, and we'll have them put it in the negative so it's your head.
There you go.
55 years later or whatever it is.
In fact, a friend of Allison's got a Blu-ray copy, and he slowed it down frame by frame, and there's actually a picture of me running, and then in the corner of this one frame is the other kid in my sweater. So
she was at Bodega Bay with you?
No, he just superimposed. It was a cut and paste job.
I see. Okay. So they could do that back then and get away with it as well. Amazing story.
Yeah. But it was a lot of fun.
That was one of the last things you did. When Dennis the Menace ended, what did you do after that?
Well, I did plenty of things in between it. I did 3 Dinosaur Chevy shows. I did Music Circus. I played the role of Tootie and Meet Me in St. Louis. I did Day in Court, gobs of time. I did an episode of The Deputy. Anyone remember that? Alan Case and Henry Fonda.
Oh, we've got people here that know all this stuff. They know more than we know.
I did the Johnny Shanks story with Skip Holmeyer. I'm the
And then you became a chiropractor, and I need some help afterwards on my neck. But she's great. And North Hollywood, Studio City area, right?
Right.
Okay.
And Stu's been a patient of mine for 20 years, and I just wanted to say when I was with him with this ordeal with Janine.
Yeah, you're going to be in our documentary.
Yeah, and Stuart would come to me once a week, and I thought he was going to explode, so I'd always triple book the space, and I would let him unload and talk him down before I'd even put him on the table. And at their wedding,
which you will see in the documentary.
Janine's miraculous recovery. I strode up there and took the mic, and I said, "Stuart is the unsung hero here." I said, American medicine is a marvelous machine, but it's only as good as who's operating it. It's like a racehorse. I said, I watched him nearly die. I was worried about this man, and the way he fought for her procedures and health care. I said, as far as I'm concerned, he should be Time Magazine's Man of the Year for navigating the medical system. So, yay!
She's been around for a long time, hasn't she?
What's that?
She's been around. But were you there when Noah built the Ark?
Yeah. I'm really a vampire, and I completely went away from show business until Geraldo called, and then it was like, I'm risen.
I very quickly want to just answer what you said, okay? I appreciate that. My big fear going into this documentary is Jeannie's going to be in it. I think, Beverly, you're going to be in it. Wink and Sandy, definitely. You came to the hospital several times. So did you. So did Beverly. You went at least once to visit her in the hospital, so you know exactly what I was going through. But anybody who has been through a medical emergency with a loved one knows this. You go into that mode. I'm not a hero, okay? You go into that mode. I realized how much I loved my wife as a result of this, and we got married because of it, because it's a lot easier to be a husband than an advance directive when you have to have procedures done, as those of you know. But you go into that mode, and you just do what you have to do. And my big fear in this documentary is you and Beverly and Dick Van Dyke and Ed Asner and Wink and Sandy and everybody that's going to be in this documentary. They're all good. So don't say this, okay? If it wasn't for Stu is really the champion here. Stu is the hero. Please don't say that. Dick Van Dyke can say it, because it'd be cool to have him say that about me.
No, it's true, because I remember the day you'd just come from the hospital, and one of the doctors said, "She's never going to talk again. Get used to it."
Yeah.
And Ed Asner looked at you and said, "Should I hold him and you hit him, or should you hold him and I'll hit him?"
And I said, "I'll hold him, you hit him, and then we'll be on TMZ." Yeah. So anyway, let's get back on track. If I had as much time as I usually do for my own show, we could go on. But we must talk to Evelyn Rudie now.
Yes, Evelyn. Oh, we tromped the boards together in the 50s and 60s, and we haven't laid eyes on each other since.
Yeah, you guys, your paths must have crossed.
Yeah.
But let me ask you about Groucho Marx first, because this is, for me, the last few shows I've done, and John Barber is going to be on my show on Wednesday, Real People, John Barber. He was on Groucho's show back in those days, and I've had a couple of other people. They all said, and maybe you remember, maybe you don't, that the whole thing, all that ad-libbing, was all scripted in advance. They told him what to say, because Groucho's going to say this, you say this. This broke my heart. Tell me that wasn't true with a 9-year-old version of Evelyn Rudie.
Not for me.
Because you were a natural on there.
Absolutely.
You rattling off your credits like you were your agent.
Nothing scripted at all. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. That's so good to hear.
Groucho was an awesome person. When I did the show, I met his daughter, Melinda. I was 9 and she was 12, and we became best friends, and I used to hang out all the time at their house. She was not interested in theater or acting at all.
That shows, because whenever he had her on the show, she was like, "Can I go home,
She
Dad?"
was totally uninterested, and I was. So he took me under his wing, and he started teaching me about comedy timing, and told me about the different bits and how they always worked out all their bits in their act in the nightclubs before they did the films. We all went to see, the whole family always went to see the Carry On movies, and then after the movies we would dissect it, and she would go, "Can I go listen to my records?" She was really sweet, but she just wasn't interested. And I learned so much from him.
Oh man, Evelyn is going to be on my show next year, and so we'll have 2 hours, and we can get through all of this. But and me too, I'm interested. How did you get into the business? How old were you? What were your first jobs before Playhouse 90 came and made you a star?
2 things. The first theater job, which was actually the first job I ever did, was the M play, which you heard, and I did play Macduff's son. I got stabbed, and my best memory of that was of my best friend, who was 3 also, seeing the play and running up on stage and going, "Evelyn's been killed! Evelyn's been killed!" and screaming, and they had to take her off stage. This was at a theater a block from my house called The Strolling Players by a British theater director named Percival Vivian, who was about 90 at the time. So that was the first theater and the first job I ever did. The first film I did was Daddy Longlegs with Leslie Caron and Fred Astaire.
Oh my God, Janine, are you listening?
An uncle of mine came over from England. He was a friend of Henry Coster. Henry Coster had a pool party. We all went to the pool party with my uncle. Henry Coster was looking at me and saying, "Oh, the studio's producing a film with Leslie Caron. We've got a scene, a Leslie Caron flashback as a child, and your daughter would look perfect. Can she be in the film?" And my father and my mother both went, "Ask her," because they didn't want me to be in show business, either of them.
That was my next question. So they didn't push you. They weren't the typical stage parents. This was all Evelyn's decision.
Anything but. My mother always wanted me to be a TV repairman or an electrician or a plumber, because she said
mother?
They always had work. Yeah.
Your mother?
My mother.
What did your dad do?
My father was a publisher, he was a writer, he was a screenwriter. He was, in Germany, he was the editor of the biggest anti-Nazi paper in Berlin, and then his name was on the list.
God.
And he and my mother had to leave. They went to Amsterdam, and he wrote underground anti-Nazi cabarets at the Tuschinski Theater for 4 years, and then they came to America. And when they arrived in Cuba, the day they arrived and were supposed to immigrate, America closed its borders. They were in Cuba for 2 years. They finally got to Miami. A friend picked them up, drove them to the hotel they were supposed to be in, and the big sign on the hotel was, "No niggers, dogs, or Jews allowed."
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So
Save this for my show.
That's their story.
Oh my.
But
now, once you got established and started working like crazy all over the place, they at least supported you and were proud of you,
my
right?
parents were terribly, terribly supportive of me. As long as I didn't get a series. My father and mother both were very, very much in favor of me having a normal life, which I did. I went to Hollywood High School, I went to LeConte, I went to Gardner Street Elementary School. Yay!
We struck a nerve with this lady over here.
Gardner Street Elementary School. So I always had a normal life. I had normal friends. I also had workshops and dance classes and all those other kinds of things. And I did about 4 or 5 episodes of something every year.
Yeah, because you knew your lines, you were reliable, and you were a good little actress.
And my father also, the thing he said was, when you get to be a teenager, you have to know your skill because you're not cute anymore.
Well,
and
I don't know about that. But
no, that's the thing. When you're little, you can get away with a lot more.
Your choice, though, it was your choice to leave the business when you became, I guess, in your early 20s, but you went behind the cameras and became a teacher and a director and a playwright and all of this. That was your choice, right? Or did the business reject you because you were getting older?
I did work until I was about 15, and then my parents said, now you have to stop. Finish your education. When you're done with your education, you can choose whatever you want to do. So I finished high school, went to UCLA. I started as an actor at the Santa Monica Playhouse the same day I started UCLA.
Wow.
I loved the theater there. I met my husband there the first night he came back from Vietnam. We got together when the founding director retired. We took over in 1973 as co-artistic directors. We've been acting, writing, directing, and heading up our education conservatory ever since.
Wow. When do you rest? Let me, before we move on to the Winker, let me ask you about working with Red Skelton and some of the really big stars. Do you have, now Beverly said it was just a job. Did it become that way with you, working with people like Red Skelton, just a job? Anything you can share with us?
It was awesome.
Okay, good.
I had
That's good.
nothing but good experiences. I was treated like a professional. I learned from so many people, from Jeannie Russell and Fred Astaire. I had a political argument with Fred Astaire at the time when I was about 5 because I overheard him say something in his dressing room that I didn't agree with, and I just told him, I don't agree with you.
Oh, do you want to hear about this?
I don't remember what it was anymore. I just remember.
You got a few months before you do my show, so
I will research it.
Please.
But everybody that I worked with was charming. Everybody was helpful. Everybody was wonderful. I was madly in love with Robert Horton. Just, oh my gosh. But it was nothing but wonderful. Partially because I had supportive parents, partially because I was never pushed into anything. It was always me pulling them. And just partially because I guess I was lucky that everybody I worked with was a pro.
This is so refreshing. I worked on Different Strokes, and every one of those kids was screwed up as an adult. And and you see it all the time. And we've got everybody on this panel, except for Wink, is so well adjusted. No, I'm kidding.
By the way, I was in love with Robert Horton too.
Before I move on, the last thing that I found that you did, is this true, was Bye Bye Birdie, the movie with Dick Van Dyke?
It certainly was.
So were you one of the teenage girls screaming for Conrad?
I was one of the cheerleaders. I went under, not an assumed name, but under my real name, hoping that nobody would notice, and just auditioned as one of the dancers. And at the end of the audition, when they said, you and you can stay, and you've been cast, and I was really excited. And then Una White came to me afterwards, and she said, it's okay, I know who you are, but I won't tell anyone.
So Evelyn Rudie is the stage name?
Evelyn Rudie Bernauer is my real name.
Bernauer.
So Evelyn Bernauer difficult to pronounce, difficult to spell.
Try
so
Jake
just
Gyllenhaal.
Dropped it off.
Zach Galifianakis, or whatever his name is, yeah. They don't care anymore today.
They don't
That's
care
why
anymore.
I didn't change my
At
name.
the time, you wanted to have a simple name that people could speak and remember.
Like Wink Martindale.
Doris Day.
Doris Day, there you go. Yeah, her name is Kappelmeyer or something like that.
Kappelmeyer.
But Wink Martindale is your name. Tell everybody what your first name is stretched out.
As a matter of fact, I found out the other night, I was watching the football game, and Al Michaels, right in the middle of the game, was talking about this coach who also has adopted my name, Wink Martindale. He's a coach for the Baltimore Ravens.
You could sue for that.
Yes, I could. In fact, the suit has just been filed. No, but he said, you know, Al Michaels, I'm sitting there watching the game, and he says, do you know what Wink Martindale's real name is? And his co-announcer said, no, I don't. Winston. Really? I didn't know that. So my real name is Winston Conrad Martindale.
Winston Conrad, and you got to tell everybody who you're named after. You
Winston.
remember?
Winston was for Churchill, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And Conrad, my mother had a fantastic crush on an actor in the 1940s. His name was Conrad Nagel.
They
Any
know.
of you remember?
They know.
And so that's Conrad comes from that.
So Wink and I were at the autograph show at the Westin near LAX last weekend, and we were talking about what we should talk about here. And Wink's been on my show a few times, and you got to come back again now that it's television. And we talked about his game show career, and we talked about being a disc jockey at KMPC. You remember when he was on KMPC? Greatest disc jockey in the world.
Thank you.
And he said, well, since this is an old-time radio convention, why don't we talk about Elvis? So that's what we're going to talk about for a little bit here, if that's okay. Because Wink goes back to the night that Elvis made his first record, and that's all I have to say. You can take it from there, sir.
Well, I was the morning DJ at WHBQ in Memphis. I did a show in the morning called Clock Watchers. And at night, we had a wild DJ on the air. His name was Dewey Phillips. He did a show called Red, Hot, and Blue. And at that time, he was playing black music for white teenagers. That's when teenagers were getting into the Clovers and a lot of the rhythm and blues groups out of Chicago. They were getting away from Perry Como and Joe Stafford and K-Star and all those people that I was playing in the morning. So I happened to be at the radio station one night when Sam Phillips, who founded Sun Records, walked in with an acetate that he had cut just that afternoon, 3 hours earlier, by a truck driver for Crown Electric. His name was Elvis Presley. And he wanted Dewey Phillips to test this. Dewey had 65% of the audience at night in Memphis. And if he put a record on the air and it was good, it could be a hit the next day. So he put this acetate on. He played it once, played it twice, played it 3, 4, 5, 7 times in a row. Of course, switchboard lit up. I heard all this commotion. I went into the control room. And it turns out that Sam had the telephone number of Gladys and Vernon, Elvis's parents, and I was designated to give them a call to find out where Elvis was because Dewey Phillips wanted him to come down to the radio station. And so I called, and Gladys answered the phone. Of course, they were listening, and we're excited about the commotion being caused over this record. By the way, the record was, That's All Right Now, Mama. That's all right with you. That's all right now, Mama. Any way you want to do.
He sings as good as he did in the clip, doesn't he?
That's all right. That's all right now, Mama. Any way you do. That record turned out to be a hit. I charged nothing extra for my bad singing. So Mrs. Presley said he was so nervous about his record being played that he went to see a double feature. He's at the Suzores Theater watching a double feature Western. So they got in their truck. They lived in low-rent housing called Lauderdale Courts out in East Memphis. They were very poor. And they got in their truck. They went down to the theater, walked up and down the dark aisles, found Elvis sitting there watching this Western all by himself, whispered to him about the excitement being generated by That's All Right, Mama. Brought him down to the station. I met him that night, and he remained my friend until the day he died.
That's amazing. And he did your local television show.
Yeah, I did.
You've got some kinescopes that you put online, I think, for people to see.
Yeah.
This is amazing. So on his way up, should we introduce Sandy? Because Sandy dated him for 6 years.
Sandy who?
Sandy, your wife.
Oh,
Sandy,
my wife.
your wife. Sandy Martindale, ladies and gentlemen. So turn around and face the phone. You started dating him at 14?
No, darling, he dated me.
Oh, pardon me. But
My mother would never let me call him. He had to call me.
At 14 years of age?
Yes, and my mother came on the first 3 dates. She didn't care if he was King Farouk. She said, my daughter's only 14. She can't date you. And he said, well, you can come on the date. So then it was okay. So my mother came on the first 3 dates. He promised her he'd be a gentleman and take good care of me. And until the day he got married, he was and he did. And we were also friends until the day he died.
Wow. This has been a pre-recorded announcement.
Ta-da!
Yes. So no. What was it? Well, not that. No, Janine would like to know. What was it like going out on a date with Elvis? Where did you go? What did you do?
Well, we went to see...
Keep it clean.
We went to see the movie Psycho. There used to be a theater on Wilshire Boulevard, which I'm sure you all remember. That was
a Hitchcock film, Jeannie.
And now it's another kind of a theater. It's the Saban now. But it was the Fox Theater, and across the street there used to be a gas station. So we'd pull up into the gas station. Joe Esposito would get out of the limo. He'd go buy the tickets. We'd go in after the movie started because he didn't want to cause a commotion. And that's when the girls would come with the flashlights and go up and down the aisles.
Make more commotion that way.
Yeah, so we went in, quietly sat down, and when the girl came and she's doing her little, and she said, and she realizes it's Elvis, and she keeps flashing the light on him, then Elvis stood up, snapped his fingers, we all got up, and we left. So I had to have my mother take me back to see the rest of the birds.
That is an incredible story. Now, it's a total coincidence that Wink knew him in his early days, and so did you, because it was years before you guys have been married, what,
44 years.
44 years. And total...
And the first 5 were terrific.
Total coincidence that he had this separate friendship relationship. I'm trying to move along. We're almost out of time.
Okay, so when I met Wink and he said he was from Tennessee, I knew he'd be a gentleman because I love Tennessee and everybody in it because Elvis was such a good part of my life. And I told Elvis that the last time we were with him in '76 before he passed that he was he couldn't believe that Wink and I first of all
got to. Well, that's amazing coincidence.
He saw us on Tattletales that day, a game show. And he thought, oh my gosh, he raised me. He said, I raised Sandy in California and knew you in Tennessee. And I said, Elvis, you're responsible because when he said he was from Tennessee, I thought, this has got to be a good guy.
Stu, by the way, her mother came on the first 10 dates between them. She didn't trust me as much as she trusted Elvis.
I'll bet. But what an amazing thing. Did you notice a change? Let me get back so the ladies aren't blocked. Did you notice a change in Elvis over the years as his fame got bigger? Did he change as a person? Because, he gained all that weight and he got into drugs and all that. What can you tell us about your relationship with him and how he did change over the years, if he did?
Well, he became the #1 superstar in the world of popular music.
And that's a hard thing to live down.
Yeah, and it's hard to live that down, and it's hard to go anywhere and do anything. But you mentioned getting into drugs and all that. I want you to give the mic to Sandy, and I want her to explain because she does it much better than I do.
Because I lived it.
He didn't really get into hard drugs. That wasn't it at all. That's not what killed him, Sandy.
It was an accident. It's okay. In the world we live in today.
Come on up here. Come on up here. Sit on my lap. No, that's okay.
No, Ginny. I wouldn't do that to Ginny. Okay. He was an actor, and when he'd come to California, I'm sure all of you know you want to be thin, you want to look good on the set. So he ate a lot in Tennessee. He loved hamburgers. So when he got to California to do the movies, he'd go on speed, diet pills. So he'd take a diet pill, but then in order to get up the next morning and be on the set at 6 o'clock, you had to get off of the speed. So then he'd take a sleeping pill. So it was a diet pill and a sleeping pill. And it becomes a vicious cycle. And then when you get immune to a diet pill and a sleeping pill, then you take 2 diet pills and 2 sleeping pills. So he knew what he was doing. I was raised very health conscious. When kids were doing drugs, I was reading health books because I loved eating and I love food. So I wanted to know everything about vitamins since I was like 12 years old. So I'd say, you don't need to do this. You can drink a glass of warm milk. You can take chamomile tea. You can have a glass of wine. There's so many different things that you can, relax you. But he said, Sandy, the doctor prescribes it. I know exactly what I'm doing. It's safe because he thought if the doctor prescribed it, he was doing the right thing and he wanted to look good for his fans.
2 words, Michael Jackson.
Yeah, he wanted to look good for his fans, so he wanted, and Michael Jackson's problem was he was very shy, and he had to deal with his shyness because he was a very shy boy, and so that helped, those things helped him come out of the shyness. But so anyway, so Elvis did the diet pills and the sleeping pills, and then when he became a karate expert, all his fingers got deformed and arthritic. So then he needed pain medication for the arthritis that he developed in his hands. So then the doctors added pain medication. So he never really did street drugs. He was never a drugged addict.
All prescribed.
It was like a vicious cycle that just kind of happened to him. And then when his mother died, and of course when you have parents, they take care of us and they tell us what to do and what not to do. His mother died. His father, who had a new wife, didn't want to rock the boat and lose his paycheck every month from his son, so he didn't take a hold of his son and say, you can't do this, this is bad for you. So he didn't do that. So Elvis just kind of got into a very sad situation. So then he got married, and Priscilla and I are the same age because we dated him the whole same time. And
That's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story.
You got another hour?
No.
But I grew up in the nightclub business, so I have more street knowledge, and I knew the world better than she did. And she thought, she loved him. And she thought, you get married and you have the white picket fence and you get rid of all these guys and you have the perfect. Well, it was Elvis Presley, so it wasn't going to be that kind of a life. So she couldn't deal with it. But when she divorced him, which he thought when he got married he would never get divorced, divorce was not in his vocabulary, then he just kind of went downhill. So then it was a downhill slide, and nobody else really, Linda Thompson tried a little bit, but nobody really was there for him. So that was sad.
You need to write a book, Sandy Martindale. I got one final question. We'll have a couple of minutes if anybody wants to ask anything of our panelists up here. The last time you saw him, where was it? How was it?
Sandy, it was my birthday in 1976. She took me to Las Vegas to see Elvis. He knew we were coming. He did 2 shows a night at the International at that time. He knew we were there. We went backstage, and he wanted to just talk to the 2 of us. Room was packed with people, but it was quiet as a mouse. They just wanted to hear what Elvis and Sandy and Wink were talking about. And so we talked, and he was big then, and he didn't look healthy. He was pasty looking. He was very sad.
How long afterwards did he pass?
In 77.
77, yeah.
But anyway, we left that night, left his dressing room that night. We went back to our hotel, closed the door behind us, and broke down and cried, literally cried. And I said, Sandy, that's the last time we'll ever see Elvis alive, and it was.
Well, I don't want to end on that. Does anybody have a question for any of our panelists? Somebody raise your hand. Anybody at all? I don't want to end on that. Wink, how many? Okay, all right. So how many game shows have you done? We figured 20.
128.
Well, no. No, you've done 22.
I've either produced or hosted 21. There's a question back there. 21
There
games.
is a question? Oh, okay, good. 21 game shows this man is
hold a
responsible
job.
for. Gambit and Tic-Tac-Toe are my favorite. Yes, sir. Your name, please?
My name is Joel. Joel.
I see that on your name card there.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. My question is to Wink. Do you have a favorite game show that you did?
Yeah, I do, because it gave me the longest term of employment. And that was one I did for almost 12 years called Tic-Tac-Toe.
Yeah, the greatest.
Yeah.
The greatest. Yes,
Thank
sir.
Anthony Tolan, I wanted to ask Beverly Washburn if she had any remembrances of working with Clayton Moore in the Lone Ranger movie.
Oh!
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I write a monthly column I live in Las Vegas, and there's a magazine there called The Vegas Voice. So I just wrote a story about him because it would be 70 years anniversary of the Lone Ranger. I didn't get to do the radio shows or the TV shows, but I did the feature film. And of course, again, I was a child, and I get kidnapped, and guess who came to my rescue? Anyway, so for me, at the time, I wasn't aware of who Clayton Moore was, but I sure knew who the Lone Ranger was. So for me, that was the thrill, to work with the Lone Ranger. And Clayton Moore and Jay Silverhills were just very kind to me, and I loved every minute of it. Thank you for asking.
All right. Anybody else? Anybody else? Oh, we do have one more person. Okay. I'm so proud of myself. We're going to get done on time. Unlike my show, we go on for hours.
Hi, my name is Chris Collins. I wanted to ask Jeannie about Jay North and whether she still is in contact with him at all. Jeannie, are you still a friend of Jay?
Oh, very much so. And Gloria Henry, too, by the way.
Gloria is 96 years old.
But Jay has lived in Florida for about 25 or 30 years now. And we've enjoyed working the nostalgia circuit together, going to different towns and doing autograph shows. It's a fabulous way to get together. And I guess LA 2 years ago was the last time, the Hollywood show, that I've actually seen him. But he won't let 6 weeks go by without calling me to see how I'm doing. Yeah, he's a real sweetie.
And to see the two of them together is really fun because he adores you, Jeannie.
Yeah, we're cosmic siblings.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally the opposite of the relationship they had.
Always
on the show.
was,
Totally
yeah.
the opposite. Meet me halfway. We got to wrap this up. Yes, sir.
Brad's in. Jeannie, the story I've heard was that Jay North had a very difficult teenage years transition from doing the show, being the child star, to an adult. Is any of that true? Did he resent the time that he was on, and now
he wasn't prepared.
And now he's made peace with it, and he's okay.
Right. He was not prepared. I did the Suzanne Summer Show with Dana Plato shortly before she died. And Suzanne said, Dana, what happened? Why did you do what you did, robbing the cleaners? And she said, the simple answer is, I did not know how to live life off of a soundstage. And Suzanne kind of went, Jeannie, what do you think about that? I was chairing a committee for Screen Actors Guild. And I said, I feel like I've taken a cannonball to the stomach. That's what we all say, So you have to relearn, what everyone else is learning on the streets as a kid. We're little greenhouse or zoo animals, and it doesn't really play on the streets in, high school USA. And Jay was in every shot. And he lit up whenever I worked. That's why we're still as close as we were, because there was another, kid and various other kids on the show. And he was an only child, and his aunt and uncle ran his career, and his mother worked. So he could not have had less of a normal support, growing up. And then to deal, there's a certain age where all of a sudden, at least back in those days, you're not a cute kid anymore, and guess what? It's all about your sexuality when you go into casting and whether or not, you would appeal in that kind of a way. And if you haven't gone through the ABCs of discovering who you are, it can be really confusing. So I feel nothing but compassion for what he went through.
But he's doing great now. He's happy as
Yeah, he's
can be.
married. He's retired. He went into corrections, which he
loves my wife. He calls Janine his West Coast wife. You know that.
Right. And he's good. He's finally at a point where he can appreciate the fact that he was a part of TV history.
Oh, and he was so good.
And he did something, and he's still a really talented guy, funny as hell. I just wish there was something he could do in front of the cameras now, because he's
you and
great.
he are always welcome on my show, as all of you. Let's hear it
Thank
for Nancy Foy and Beverly Washburn, Jeannie Russell, Evelyn, Rudie, and my buddy Wake Martindale and Sandy Martindale. Thank you all. My show will be live this Wednesday at 4 o'clock California time at StuShow.com. My guest will be John Barber from Real People. We hope you'll watch. Run those end credits, and we are out of here. Thank you all.